where we started here. And so what happened, I run classes where I'm standing on lectures, stages like this. I run lots of hands-on seminars. This is actually one of my credibility classes where we talk about how to assess website credibility and content credibility. And so what happened is that there's a lot of personal interaction that happens. I talk to you and I get to see your paper, and I talk to you when you haven't turned in your assignment, that kind of stuff. And so what happened was that Alfred Spector, the head of research at Google, called me up and said, hey, Dan, we got to do something with this MOOC stuff. Why don't you build a MOOC? And so this was a little over a year ago. And so I had to go look it up, what define MOOC. And so I discovered it was this massive open online class, right? Whatever. And so this was the vision that I had. I would be speaking to the unwashed masses in a concert sort of setting. Now, the background here was that I've been doing research on how people use Google and how they don't use Google, how they search for stuff, what they do with that information once they find it. And so that's the context that I've been coming from. And about 4 years ago, I started teaching classes like this one, where everybody would have their laptop, and I would say, let's look up blah, 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 blah. And then you would do it, then we'd talk about methods for being better or more effective or more accurate or something. And I will tell you, this is being taped, right? Well, people aren't so good. The primary thing about Google is it's very easy to use, and 99% of the time it does exactly what you want, and that's great. But by definition, we're all in the long tail. We are way out in the long tail with our questions and our queries. And for doing more advanced searches, a little bit of training goes a long, long way. So what I started as a framing thing was, how can we teach people to search more effectively? And there were really two things that are motivating us here. Search is really simple to use, but a lot of people don't take advantage of it. And believe me, if I taught one of my advanced classes here, you would all walk away saying at least once in this hour, oh my God, that's my new analytic. Oh my God's per hour. And I'm currently running at 4. But that's not this talk. I mean, that's the way, that's the content that I wanted to bring to my MOOC. So I wanted to communicate that. And because it's Google, we set up objectives and key measures and so on. And so I said, look, I want to teach 20,000 students or so. I'll be happy with that. And I want to improve their performance by 33% as measured by pre- and post-test performance. Now, that's fine, but the technology is an interesting place to be, because as you well know, Thomas Edison's famous for saying this, and so I don't want to even get into this, will MOOCs destroy the university debate? Short answer, no. We can talk about that later. But, you know, the technology of books and film, which is what, you know, Edison thought, did not destroy the schools. They augmented them, and I believe MOOCs are going to kind of do the same thing. And if you think about it, you know, a long time ago in a university far, far away, you know, everything in the future is past. Remember Plato? Everybody remembers Plato here, right? They had multiplayer games, screen sharing instrument. They had everything, everything. If you don't know about this system, it's worth looking up. I know it's green on black background, so it's a little dated, but it was a fantastic system that presaged a lot of what we now think of as advanced MOOCology. So here are the players, right? Now, the one thing that's just happened since I made this slide is that these two have merged. Okay, so this was my MOOC platform. So we built this, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. But we built this platform, and then we open sourced it, and we convinced that the edX people and we should merge, and we've now open sourced the edX stuff, and our course builder software is now merging with them, and we'll see how that all works out. But the cool thing about the MOOC space right now is there's so much activity in it. You can take a course on essentially anything, right? You want to understand Virology 101, do that. You want to understand you know, classical Roman Greek mythology, do that. And it's interesting to think about why people are offering these MOOCs and why people are taking them. And we'll talk about some of that. My expectation getting into this was really to try to understand a couple things. If we offered this content, would people come? Was it intrinsically interesting? Or does everybody say, oh, I know how to use Google, I'm done, I'm so expert already? As I told the stories in my last talk this morning, trust me, even the guys who built the search engine are not expert at using it. Just because you can build a Formula One racing car doesn't mean you can drive it, right? So we wanted to build all these kinds of things. We wanted to have, a better advantage of instructor time, pervasive formative assessments, and all that jazz, right? But for me, the interesting thing was, if we have a large online class, how can we use our peers, how can we use the other students in class to improve the quality of the class? And we wanted to both have feedback and motivation. So we built a MOOC, right? And because we're at Google, we think of everything as a software problem. So this is the very first MOOC. This is called the Basic Power Searching with Google MOOC. And so this is me in my blue shirt. We built, 32, 33 different lessons. They're classic XMOOC style, right? So they have a little short video component to it. They're about 5 minutes long. We shot them. It's a total of about 6 hours of instruction spread over 2 weeks. So if you're a student, it's about 10 hours per week, maybe 20 hours total, right? One thing we did was we did it in a semi-synchronous style where we offered it with a particular start date, we gated it, we released multiple modules, everything fine. So we also had these assessments where you could go through and you have multiple choice, fill in the blank, the standard sort of stuff, nothing sexy here, okay? One thing we did do was we had a very active involvement with our forum. So we used Google Groups as our forum moderating method, and we set up a group per lesson. So for lesson 2.5, there was this activity, and one of the things that we did sort of semi-accidentally was to have in each of the forums something like this: share the most interesting thing you find in the forum. And we sort of put it in there just because we thought it would be a good idea. It was a great idea. It was a totally awesome idea. Primarily because we had people from all around the world participating. And so you'd see kids in India putting things in the forum that I never would have dreamt of. Kids in Japan putting in stuff. And what ended up happening was that everybody in the forums, if you were even a 10% participation kid, you saw the world in a different way. And it also taught me, because of the first class, trust me, the first class is always the hardest because you end up learning a lot. We learned a lot about building these things. So, as I said, we did this in a semi-synchronous style where we release it, we get participation first day, second day, third day, so on, right? And what ended up happening was we ran the course over 2 weeks. We had the final exam on the 23rd, a little over a year ago. Very straightforward. There's nothing really about that is surprising to you. One thing that was surprising to me was the challenge of taking my course content. So if you're a professor here and you've been teaching physics for 12 years, you've got physics in a can, right? Here's slide deck number 1. Here's slide deck number 2. Here's, still in my garage, I still have got a file folder about this big with about 500 pounds of transparencies. Some of you do too, right? And I don't know what to do with them. I could rescan them, but at some point my garage is going to blow up. Anyway, I had this structure and I had this model of how to teach this stuff. And we had to convert it into these smaller units. And it's not just a chop problem. You can't just take 12 hours of content and go in 5-minute units. It doesn't work that way. The rhetoric falls apart. The story is not the same. So we had to go through this process of redesigning the content. So we ended up with 32 lessons, 4 hours of content, a couple hours of exercise per week. Now, let me give you a couple minutes of the pragmatics. Okay? So being Google, they said, can you do this in 5 weeks? I said, no. We had to write the software because we didn't use anybody else's software. I said, well, okay, that'll take 4 weeks, right? And you can do the content another week. Well, no. So this was the actual schedule. Because it's Google, they said, you're going to launch on the 10th of July. Okay, yes, sir. Because, there are school schedules or exogenous factors, whatever. So we did this, and we formed a team on May 14th, which was the day I came back from Chi. And they said, oh, by the way, you go down to building 1200, there's a team of 10 people waiting for you. Really? Yeah, get to work. So we got version 0 of the software running 6 weeks later. This is great when you've got, you know, App Engine running in the background and all you have to do is write Python. We opened registration on the 25th, and notice the overlap. We opened registration and we hadn't finished testing. We parallelized a lot, and we actually delivered it all, right? So it was great. So here's the schedule, basically. The stuff in July is when we offered the class, starting on the 10th, finishing on the 23rd. So for weeks 1 were organization, and I was meeting people and understanding their name and so on, designing, speccing, coding, and so on. Now, the part I want to point out here is right there. We delivered the class the last 2 weeks. Week 8, usability testing. Usability testing. Let me ask you, have you ever been to a class where it clearly was not usability tested? Yes, you have. Shame on your teacher, right? So this is one of the things we learned, is that usability testing of these things for content and for software, equally important. So this is one of my usability testing sessions where you see the people circled are my guys. They're sitting there taking notes as the students work through the content. So we actually watched over the shoulder to see what people would do and the issues they were having, and what, if they were going forward, backward, up and down the page and all that stuff. We instrument a lot, but having talented observers doing usability testing is massively important. Do this. Do not let a MOOC go out of your hands without usability testing it first, okay? That's the one thing you got to take away from this. Everything, we changed everything based on usability tests. We changed the flow, the writing, the conceptual structure, the questions, you name it, we changed it. So that's an important thing. So this is our design challenge, was to build this MOOC. And we wanted, because we wanted scale, we wanted to say, gee, we should be able to handle 100,000 simultaneous users. And so we, for example, one of the things we discovered was we had to redo the database portion 3 times, because we kept load testing it, and it wouldn't work. We get it to 20,000, it would just fall over. Get it to 80,000, it'd fall over. Finally, we got it to 150,000, it was fine. But we redid that a bunch of times. So we did this. The second big challenge was taking all my content, all my examples, and refactoring it. And that's kind of the way we thought about it, as a software refactoring problem. We had a new structure we had to pour it into. It wasn't just, you know, making shorter ones, but we had to figure out ways to get all these units to kind of be coherent by themselves, because we figured, and we were right, people would come in, do their little tiny lesson and leave, then come back the next day or something, right? So each of these kind of has to be coherent. You have to have 5-minute coherent chunks, because the way the students do it. You don't get them for 50 minutes. 50 minutes for here, a luxury, right? But that doesn't happen in the MOOC world. So we had to do this, and this is the problem, right? I had all these slides, and I had to, like I said, refactor these in an interesting way. So we did that, and we also built our system out by basically writing lots of Python code and using every tool lying around Google that we had. So we had, you know, YouTube, handy thing to have in your portfolio. We had App Engine, another handy thing. We had Google Groups. We had Google Moderator, et cetera, along with the whole package of analytics stuff. So we didn't have to write that, right? So we already was existing in a pretty competent infrastructure. So we then had to figure out how to, you know, make those groups work for potentially up to, you know, say 150, 200,000 people. So we figured out ways to do that. We wanted to make it all kind of work smoothly. So now when we actually ran the course, there were lots of things that I didn't expect. And now, of course, MOOC practitioners know this will happen. But one of the things that surprised me was of the people who finished the class, the first MOOC, a third of them participated in the forums, you know, for some non-trivial thing. They actually made a couple posts. Everybody read something in the forums. Of the people who posted in the, 7% of everybody posted something in the forum, which was, by my standard, pretty good. A significant number of those questions were posted, were answered by students in the class. So see, here's the thing that surprised me the most. I thought, I'm going to open a class for 100,000 students. My email box is going to get hammered. Did not happen, right? And the reason it didn't happen is because mostly questions were answered by other students. So we had a flock of TAs. I had a couple TAs in Japan, a couple in India, a couple in the United States, and we had a 24/7 TA structure, which we could do, but we only had 8.
Can I unpack those numbers just quickly? 33% of finishers join. Does that mean they made at least one post?
Yes, at least one post, yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And then 7% of
All students, yeah. Yeah, so what I mean, this is all students, even including non-finishers. 33% of the people who graduated. Right, yeah. We also discovered things that, again, I should have known ahead of time. We're trying to make this international class, and so I would ask a question like, how many teaspoons are in a cup? Okay? I didn't know that imperial teaspoons are different than US teaspoons, right? And so there were a lot of issues like that that came up. And then the language issues, even though we were all speaking in English, there are little language issues that surprised the heck out of me. For example, the due date. We would say the final is due on this date. How hard can that be? I'm not making this up. Student writes to me and says, representing a lot of other students, when you say a woman is due with a baby on this day, you don't really expect the baby to arrive on that day. Can I turn in my assignment late? I thought that was better than my dog ate my homework, right? At least my cyber dog ate my homework, right? So we actually, that's just an example of the kinds of language misalignments we would have. And it happened a fair bit, actually much more than I expected. So we have lots of metrics, and I'm going to show you some graphs in a second, but this one, well, was lovely, right? How do you know when you're succeeding? 2 interesting measures. A, when people set up Facebook groups to support your class and you had nothing to do with it. Okay? This one's in Brazil, and so people were setting up Facebook groups that I had nothing to do with, and I applied for admission, and they said no. All right then, I can understand that. The other metric that I love here is when people steal your stuff. So there's one site that has all of my videos and all of my test questions and answers. And there are now, as far as I can tell, roughly 100 different copies of the entire class scattered around the web. I don't know why they wanted to, I mean, it's all there anyway, but they, you've succeeded when people start ripping off your content. It's really interesting to see your lectures showing up on Pirate Bay. So, the first of my charts here. So this is class number 1. We ran this class twice, the basic searching class. And I'll tell you about the advanced one in a second. We ran it twice. The first time, we had 22,000 course completers. And this is the curve showing the mean, the average, the net improvement, pre-test, post-test difference, right? So how much did you get better? And there are, of course, some people who got 100% better. They missed every one of the pre-tests. They got them all right on the final. I don't know if they cheated. I don't care, right? But the truth is, most people end up over here, the 40% improvement range, which is great. So I charted this, and I thought, that's fantastic. And then I noticed this funny little thing right here. See that? Some people went negative. Now, one of the things I realized about that is if you have a large enough student population, right, and they're not all sitting in the classroom, and the university, of course, preferentially selects those people out, right? But when they're in my class online and I can't see them in Village in India, right, there are some people who scored worse on the final than they did on the pretest. So I went and looked because I was so interested. How could you possibly score worse? Well, it turns out there's a population down there of people who basically answered randomly the pretest and answered randomly at the end. And the randomness of it was negative, right? So one of the things I think this points out is the nature of a very large student population is different than a residential campus. We here modify their behavior in an interesting, subtle way. Those people never show up. Now, of course, what I really want to do is call these people up and talk to them and say, well, did you get anything out of the class? But I didn't. I didn't have their address. So we did a lot of, I have probably 200 charts, something like this. This is sort of a paradigm of the chart, where we're watching to see how much participation there was. This one happens to be YouTube video watches by class. And there's two interesting things to see here. This red line here is from the very first viewing, very first episode of the class. And I couldn't figure out what happened here with lesson 5.4. Turned out somebody Reddited it. It's like getting slash dotted. And so that one video went through the roof. It turns out to be the summary of all the key tricks. And so a lot of people watch that. So the other thing is if you integrate under that red curve for all the classes and all the videos, it's about 20 years of YouTube time that's being delivered for one class. Okay? Second big thing about this is when you look at the blue curve is to the end of the year. So after the end of the class, and you let the class, it's just sitting out there. We're not giving out tests or anything. People are just coming to the class, clicking through the videos and watching it on their own. Okay? I also discovered that a lot of teachers using this in their information literacy classes. Okay? So you can actually see, if you watch the real-time analytics, you can watch these classes bubble through the chart as they, all the classes in Miss Smith's class in Devonshire, England, are going through the material. But anyway, what happens is that if you just leave that content out there, that curve just keeps going up and up and up and up, right? As more and more people do it. The latest version of this shows that for this first class that we did, by this point, now that's been out there for a little over a year, we've had about 35 years worth of viewing of the content. So that's 35 times 24 hours a day times 365 days a year, which is a massive amount of content, even for YouTube. We also use, like I said, some of the other technology we had lying around, including the Hangouts on Air. So we used Google Moderator, which is a way to collect questions and allow votes to happen. So the first one we did, we had 647 questions submitted, 15,000 votes to rank order the questions. And we would sit on video and answer questions. It's impractical to do it live because there's just too many people watching. You would have, 1,000 people watching you, and it's just chaos to try to take live questions. But what was great was we had 40% of all the students in this first class watched one of these Hangouts, participated in one of them, or submitted a question. So we had good pickup. So this is now measures of students attending and coming into the class by day while the class was running. And so you can see here, these are unique page views. So the very first day of class, we had 300 and some odd thousand people page views. Okay? And since you could only see 3 pages, that's a lot of students coming in, checking it out. And of course, you then get the big down sweeps. This is the kind of pattern you see all the time in page views. If you're a webmaster, you see this kind of pattern all the time. And of course, it's because those are weekends, right? So guess what? Students don't come to class on weekends, even if it's online. Same story. We then had the last class here on the 19th. We concluded the final was due there. We still had people then coming in after trying to do the final, but that's the way it goes. See what happened. Oh yeah, 3 minutes and 40 seconds on page on average, which doesn't include the YouTube view time. So it's pretty good. This is distribution from the very first class. No, this is actually, I swapped these around. This is actually the second class. But it's the same kind of idea. 12% from Brazil. And it was not in Portuguese. Right? This is all in English. But like I said, there are a lot of Facebook groups that are posting translations of everything across and forth. We also had text versions. So for accessibility reasons, we had text versions with images of every class. So we had the YouTube video where you could click through to see the text version of the link. So we had 12% from Brazil in the second class and 6% from India on that second class. The first class is a switch Brazil and India there. Everything else is kind of the same. Yeah, I'm actually impressed by the long tail here because we actually had students turn in assignments in Indonesian. They didn't know I have an Indonesian software engineer on my staff. So here's another way of looking at that same data. Ask me off video. The right answer is no. We'll talk about it later. So basically, what we ended up starting with was roughly 150, this is the first class, 150,000 people signed up. And of course, between that and actually getting to the first class, 1.1, you get this big drop off here, right? Roughly 39% between initial sign up and actually showing up to the first class. So we also saw about a 6% decline per class. And as far as I know, talking to other MOOC offerers, this is the MOOC constant, right? It's right up there with E. It's like you're just going to see this, right? And so one of the hacks you can do as a MOOC operator, you can dial in how many people you want to graduate by cutting the class wherever you want to cut it. You cut it out here, guess what? You're going to have a 10% completion rate. You cut it over here, it's going to be 20% complete. And so notice, the longer you run your class, the more people you lose. Okay? It's not like a university class where you pay thousands of dollars to come here. Different kind of thing. We also found these interesting little upticks right there. Those are people coming back to the class in response to an email reminder. Email reminders rock. You will retain, whatever that fraction is, just by sending them at the beginning of each new lesson. So here are the numbers. We had 74% that get to the first lesson, and I wanted to point out this FCCR, which is first course to completion ratio. So we had 19% FCCR. That is the number of people who come to the first class and then take the final, take that ratio. Because the people who sign up for the class, as we just saw, we lost 39% right off the top. Right? Those are irrelevant people. They just signed up because somebody pointed out to them. We don't care about them. But we had 22,000 students complete this course. Okay, so we're doing all right. Now we also sent out a lot of surveys afterwards to both completers and non-completers, and we got really great response rates. I couldn't believe how well people responded. One of the things we asked them was Net Promoter Score, right? Would you recommend this course to a friend, blah, 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 5-point scale. We got 4.5. I don't know if you've done score ratings like this. That's a massively good score. That's the kind of score you get for recommending things like breathing or conjugal visits. I mean, it's a very high score, so we're very happy with that. We had 98%, and so on. I talked about mean. So now if you look at the community learning thing, here's every couple days we take another sample here. So this is the number of posts in each of the classes. So the red is the number of posts in class 1, green class 2, purple class 3, and so on. So great question. Why is class 3 so different than class 2? I mean, what happened? What did I do wrong? First off, this is over the weekend, okay? Second, the material, it was just much more accessible, and so people just didn't have many questions. I read most of all these forum posts, so I will tell you, people just, whatever I did in class 3, people got it. They totally got it, and they didn't ask many questions. So, so we saw this pretty high participation rate, and this is what a typical forum post would look like. You would see people come in and where do people go during breaks, exploring Google Trends, setting up at Google Alerts. And we also had all these tags so you could see what kind of topic it was. The tagging thing, each person had to put on their own tag, kind of didn't work out so well. But one of the things I loved about this was somebody like this would ask a question and then somebody else would answer. Meaning I didn't get the email. I didn't have to answer it. My TAs didn't have to answer it. And what I really love about this is the time constant. I can't answer the questions that fast, right? So what this means is the synergy of the students is phenomenal. This is typical. This is not an aberration. This is very, very typical. The other kind of thing I saw here was the student asks a question up above, blah, 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 about these two questions, and this person replies in Arabic. Right. What you don't know is I've highlighted the person's name. This guy's a native Arabic speaker. This guy knew that, and he answered in native language. I can't do that. You can't do that, right? So this means that the students in the class participating in the forum actually are a serious augmentation to the whole experience of the class. Interesting question I don't know the answer to. If you have a class of 100 versus 100,000, does that participation constant change? I bet it does. Because if you run a class of 100, chances are really good I'm not going to have a native speaker of Urdu. Or if I do, I only have one. And there's no other second one, right? But in this kind of class, trust me, there are at least 5,000 Urdu speakers. And if they see something written in Urdu, they're going to respond in Urdu, right? So there were a lot of posts I couldn't read. Fantastic. So now the bad parts. We offered a certificate as a PDF file, which was sent as an attachment. This took more time and effort than anything else we did. Handling certificates. You would think it'd be stupid and simple. It is not. One of the biggest sources of difficulty was just, I lost the email, I can't print PDF, blah, 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 blah. Could you please print it and mail it to me? No, I can't, right? The other big one was people logged in, they registered under one name, but they wanted the different name on the certificate. And after a couple of those, we finally said no. If you register with Joe Schmaltzy, but your real name is Jonathan Weimang, right? You've got it. I'm sorry, because we don't have any authority control here. We don't actually know what your true name is. It's whatever you gave us. So what you should expect when you're designing a MOOC, right? First lesson. Expect to iterate, because we tried really hard to get it right the first time. We did a lot of testing, and the difference between class 1 and class 2 was pretty big. Count on a community effect. I would love to know, this is one of the outstanding research questions I would love people to work on, is as you change from a 1,000-person class to a 10,000 person to 100,000, what changes in the community effect? I don't know. We had a great effect here when we had so many students, but I don't know what it was. Plan on rewriting and redesigning the assessments. As you saw, one of the first things that happened was all of my test questions leaked out into the internet. I can no longer use those. I think this is now just axiomatically true for all education, right? I know teachers in my kids' school try to prevent students from walking out with their tests, but I got a phone, man. Click, it's gone. A quarter of a second and it's leaked. So I think this just changes the mutually assured destruction between teachers and students. Plan for analytics. The big lesson here for me, I do a lot of analytics at work, and we redid our analytics multiple times. And we're going to offer the class again probably next month, and we're going to redo it all over again. So whatever you start, just keep, practice clean metadata practices, right? Because it's easy to get a whole giant CSV file coming out of this stuff, and you look at it 6 months later and go, what was that? You have no idea. So you have to track that stuff, but also plan to rework your analytics constantly. And like I said, not only are certificates a pain, they are a huge motivator. I never would have believed this before the class. But the number of people who signed up just to get a certificate, and this is it, right? This is a PDF file, right? It's not hard to fake it. But the number of people, I actually got this off the web, I didn't. This is from some guy in Russia, who put this on his website as a credential. Now, no credential intended, right? It's just a certificate of completion. But it's interesting to see people using these to try to get jobs, and they're getting jobs. So, hey, that's great. So that was our first MOOC. Now let me quickly flash to the second MOOC. The second MOOC was the same one, updated, the same content, same kind of thing. We offered it in October. This time we had, here I'll put up the comparison numbers. These are the first MOOC. This is the second MOOC. 154,000 registered first time, 127,000 second time. But, big change. Look at this. The FCCR here is very different the second time. A, we got better students. B, we fixed a lot of bugs. So things that people were getting hung up on in the way we had written them. So I think one of the interesting evolutions we see here is that course content is no longer static. You It used to be you print out a textbook, and maybe 6 years later, maybe you get a new one. We changed this in a month. We changed a lot of it in a month. Okay. Now, this is my favorite chart by far. Okay? Let me explain it to you. What we did is we wrote a function which was a measure of an individual's cookie. We would track how much advanced search behavior they would do, the use of double quotes, use of different advanced operators, and so on. And we did, once people registered, there was a sort of opt-in option, and people would start tracking it. So before they started the class, from the time they registered to the time the class started, they were running about 0.4 level of advanced search use. Okay? So this is the people who registered for class. This is an average of 2 million other people. This is sort of the hoi polloi. This is everybody else in the world. So they're running at 0.1. What this tells me is the people who register for the class are already advanced. Okay? They're 4 times higher users of advanced search than the rest of people. Then this is the period of the class. Watch what happens. Everybody starts going up. And then these red people, non-completes. These people did not finish. What happened here is they went up a little bit and then they bailed out of the class and never came back. And so since they were still in my opt-in group, I could measure their cohort behavior and it stayed at 0.4. No change. So you take half the class, no effect. But look at this black line. These are people who completed the class. Now, as you'd expect, it goes up during the class because that's what the class is about, right? It goes way up to like, let's say 1.6 or something. So like 4 times what they were doing in ordinary life. And then for 2 weeks after class, that's what the opt-in deal was. I could track your search aggregated anonymized behavior 2 weeks post-class. They stayed up here at like 0.8. This tells me I've changed their behavior. I've changed their behavior in a substantial and long-lasting way. Now, I don't know what it's like out here, 6 months afterwards, but they have no motivation for using these advanced operators. In the survey that I gave here, I found an interesting thing. Why is it so high? Because they're tackling harder problems now. They're now doing problems that they could not solve before because of the class. So unlike, say, taking a university chemistry class, where once you leave the chemistry class, you probably never do chemistry again. So this is a meaningless measure for that venue. But for us, where people do this stuff every day, we can see that it really changes. So after that class, my boss says to me, gee, couldn't we issue this as software? I said, sure. So we issued it as a course builder. So we took my instance of my class, and that turned into Course Builder version 1. And then, literally 2 weeks later, Sailor.org came out with their class. Now, if you actually went through this class, it looks exactly the same. They didn't even change the font. I mean, it's exactly the same. They just swapped in mechanics knowledge for search knowledge. That was very gratifying. So there's a bunch of stuff to know about this. Mostly this is changing. Used to have to know JavaScript, HTML. That's all changing now with the new merger with edX. But the cost is still pretty true. If you have around 300 students, you build one of these classes, it's all free. Even if you run up to 150,000 students like you were doing, it's about $20 a day. So if you do that over 2 weeks, you can do the math. It's kind of pocket change to actually run the class. Now, one of the things we were teaching were things like this. We wanted to teach ways to solve problems like, where is this? And of course, the answer is you use advanced search operation like search by image. That led us to listening to a lot of the responses we were getting from people about the class. They said, this is great, but I need the advanced version. I said, yes, I can do that. So we built the advanced version. That's the third MOOC. Now, the advanced power search with Google we did a lot of different things differently. For example, we started it in February, but we made it challenge-based and in a nonlinear organization. So the first MOOC, like every other class you've been in, there's lesson 1, lesson 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 2.1, 2.2, and so on, very linear. This was all, you have to figure out the next thing yourself. And I thought this was perfectly meta, because you're learning how to search. You should search over the corpus of knowledge how to search so that you can teach yourself how to search, right? Terrible idea. It totally didn't work. We did an analysis of what the sequence were that people went through the nonlinear content. It was completely linear. 99% of everybody followed exactly the same sequence. It was a noble try. But one of the things it tells me is that either we have locked our students into a very linear sequential model, it's going to take a lot of work to get them out of that, or maybe that's what really works best. Anyway, so we did this, and it was, so we had these lessons, we had the videos and so on, and they were, so you see it's a little bit different. We would actually do a challenge, and then you would have to figure out what lessons to teach yourself in order to solve that challenge, right? So we would ask a question like this. Basically, we found this in this particular biosphere reserve. What kind of feather is it? And here is some suggested content to go look through and learn from. There's some examples. It was a nicely, interestingly different structure, but it all boiled down in the end to watching me in the corner explaining how to do these different things. One of the things we had was the ability to do real-time analytics. So with the analytics package for Google, you can basically point it to your MOOC and say, tell me what's going on right now. So at this particular one, at this moment, I had 380 people going through the class at that time. And the fascinating thing, it didn't matter when I looked at this. There were always 200 to 400 people in the class actively going through everything right now. And you can see where they're at, what they've done, what they're doing, all that stuff, where they're coming from. And so you could get insight into a page like this. So this is the sort of advanced page with all the strategies, all the content is here in a nonlinear fashion. So you could say, well, I want to find out about Creative Commons. Click, there's the lesson. Okay? Now guess what? That's not what people did. Right? We offered also, as we did in the first class, these text versions. So this is the same thing as that other one we saw. So here's where the analytics hit the road. I took all of the individual lessons here, and I looked at the views by text version, which is in blue, and video version in red. Like, holy cow. No structure whatsoever, right? The only thing that really stands out is that some of them have a lot more video views, like this one. This is the intro. This is the very first definition of how the research projects work. Otherwise, you're kind of, all the same. But it adds up to more than the number of students we had in the class. Okay, what's going on? They're watching the video and watching the text. And it's not just because, I asked, would you like to know? It's not just because they preferred they were video learner style. They actually got different things out of both presentations. Okay? So then I sorted it, right? I sorted it by the sum of the two numbers here. And I thought, that's really interesting, but this doesn't tell me anything. I thought, you know how you do analytics, right? You're exploring, trying to figure out what's the structure in the data. And I thought, wait a second. I've seen this curve before. And then I turned it around like that. All I did was flip it. And then I thought, I know what's going on. I know what's going on with this curve. That is the distance from the top of the content. These are exactly the same curves you see on every web page. If you have a set of links like this, you get exactly the same curve depending on how far the result is from the top of the page. This is from the top of the home page on the course. Okay? So if you're designing a course like this, distance from the top matters. Okay? Fascinating thing. We also did, for this one, kind of self-graded assignments. And the blue is, we graded, 500 some odd of these, 535. So this is our distribution of scores. The red is their distribution of scores. What I found interesting was that there are so many people who are willing to give themselves a 0. Right? So I didn't expect that. But I also expected a few red people, some of the students to be in here. No. This suggests that our rubric needs tweaking. Or we need different rubrics for different populations. So one of the things we found out in the first class was international versions of English are very different. I think that's what's going on here. That's an open question at this point. We also looked at other course completion rates. And so this is a graph from Katie Jordan that I copied into here because I wanted to put my classes on here. So that's a bunch of other classes, a bunch of other MOOCs that have been published. This is our first class. right here. We had 157,000 enrolled. We completed, whatever that number is, I can't read it, like 14%, using her definition of completion. This is the second class, right? So we had 127,000 enroll, but we completed with a little over 19%, which is phenomenally good. But, lest we think we're so smart, this is the third class, this is the advanced class. We only had 37,000 show up, register, and we finally completed only a little over 7%. Fascinating thing, I went to the Library of Congress not long after this class finished, and I had all these librarians rush me, right? Say, I took your class, that was really hard. and now I know, right, we really shot that one way too high. So if I'm going to do this again, A, I'm going to linearize it, B, I'm going to do multiple versions of the rubric, and C, I'm going to change some of the difficulty of it. So there's the summary of all that. The net here is for course completion ratio, I predict we're going to get up to 22, 25% when we redo that class for the next time. So the big takeaways for me here is that when we study why people don't finish the MOOCs, there's a ton of reasons. But the longer you offer the MOOC, the more dropouts you get. Just the way it works. Mostly people say life intervened, right? My kid got sick, I had to go back to work, something like that. And that dominates the equation. These are free classes, and that's what it works the most, right? So this, I think, is actually the right takeaway for me from Tom Friedman about when there are a plethora of MOOCs, you know, it's one of these things where I think the quality is going to actually dominate. So to leave you with a couple thoughts here, one of the things I think we should all be thinking about is taking MOOCs is part of what we have to do. And I want to give a pitch for one serious game that I have. This is the googleaday.com. And so every day I ask questions like this, these trivia questions. And then I show you how to actually get the answer. And of course, I write a blog, so if you're interested in this sort of topic matter, it's searchresearch1.blogspot.com. And I give lots of pointers back and forth from the MOOC to this and so on. Thanks very much for sticking with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. So some of you have to go at 1. Feel free to get up and do that. We will stay for a few more minutes and ask Dan some questions. So,
any questions I can answer? I know that's kind of a lot of data to throw at you at one time, but yes.
I have a question about, I mean, you're working in a field where you have like a definitive right answer. But when you said like students were responding to questions and you have to, did you find that any problem with people saying this is the answer and it was wrong?
Oh, yeah.
Like, how does
So,
that work? Like, do you have to mediate that?
yeah.
Like,
So the question is, what do you do when you have variant answers, basically?
yeah.
And that actually happened a fair bit. You would have people saying, well, the answer to this question is 27. These people would say it's 227, right? And so when it got to be, oftentimes I would find that the community would sort it out, which is great. I will tell you the other thing about the community effect, which is great. So if there was a time when I couldn't respond, somebody else would chime in and say, oh, I happen to know that Dan is traveling today. He will be online tomorrow. They would cover me. Great. But we also saw them doing the same sort of thing and working out why people got these variant answers. And so what would happen in the explanation is that someone else would analyze the other student's response and say, oh, you made a mistake here, and so I didn't have to do it. And this is, for me, the greatest, coolest thing about the MOOC is the social intermediation between answers, between variant responses, and the students supporting each other. It was cool. Yes?
With trying to facilitate that those students are working together,
Yeah.
did you build any extra tools that Google didn't already have? I mean, you kept saying that these tools were available to us, but really they're available to everyone. And obviously,
Yeah. So the question is, what did we build in addition to obvious?
particularly with facilitation of the interaction.
Yeah, we didn't, well, we did now. But in the very first one, we basically took it as vanilla. We took the groups as kind of the vanilla code. The second one, we added a few filtering mechanisms and some search mechanisms and stuff like that. If you go and look at the newest MOOC that just came out from National Geographic, it's tagged and sorted and filtered and organized really differently than that. So we have been, that's one thing we've been focusing a lot, is how to make the social experience better. I don't know that we have the right answer yet, but we keep trying. Yes?
So that scatter plot of percent completion and
Yeah.
number of students
Yeah.
doing it, and it was pretty scattered.
Yeah.
Was there any predictors of completion rate, like number of classes, length of courses or anything like that?
The question is, what are predictors for course completion rate? Yeah. We didn't really analyze that, but like I said, the longer the class, the lower the completion rate. I mean, that's just one of those things, right? But other than that, we didn't analyze demographic features or anything like that. It's a good idea. I would love, for example, do location-based analysis. So, for example, is there a completion rate different in India or Brazil or the Southeast or Pacifica? I don't know. I don't know. Yes.
Do you have any data on who tends to help in the forums and being blinded?
Yeah. So the question is, do we have any data on the people who help out in the forums? We do, actually. And we have it from two different sources, both from our group experience, and Google has a very large effort called the help forums. So if you have a bug with some, like Gmail, and you go look for help, you will end up in one of the Google help forums. And from that experience, and from our experience, we know the same thing, which is that there will be people who will self-identify as helpers. And they tend to come up out of the murk. They answer frequently, and they tend to be right, and they tend to develop a strong social network between themselves, between the helpers. So if you've got, say, 1,000 people in the community, there will be, say, 10% of those that are going to be helpers. And they will end up connecting to each other and having their sort of background off of the radar social network. So for example, in the help centers that we run at Google, we now have a whole separate helper social network, which is not on the radar. You can't see it if you're just using it. So that's been a tremendous support for us. We haven't done that.
Is that a pretty common finding in social online communities? Something I've heard before. It's about
Yeah.
social network structures for these kind of online communities.
So the flip side of that, because there's always a flip side, right, is how many pathologies did we have to excise from the body? And the thing that really surprised me, out of our first class, we had to throw out 3 people. That's it. For inappropriate postings or just being jerks in general. But 3 out of 100,000, that's pretty good. I thought it'd be much higher. And they're really easy because one of the things you can do is just sort of show everybody by frequency of posts. The helpers always rise to the top because they post a lot. The pathologies always rise to the top. And so you have a relatively small number of people to actually look at. And the pathological people are very easy to spot. Goodbye.
You mentioned this was involved in survive.
Yeah.
Because we did not provide your email address, or just because of the...
So the question is, how is it possible, Dan, that your email did not get flooded? Well, here's the ironic thing about it. When you teach people how to search, they can find your email address. Right? It's not like particularly hidden or anything. So I think mostly the truth is, from talking to a lot of my students, is that they feel like they can't ask. So they don't. There are a few people who will send me mail, and I got a few messages, but I didn't get 1,000. I didn't even get like 5 a day, maybe 1 or 2 a day. So I think it's the teacher-student barrier. I don't think I'm particularly, Germanic, professorial, speaking ex cathedra, reasonably approachable, but it didn't happen. I didn't hand it out, but trust me, it's in the forums. If you want to write to Dr. Russell, here's his email address. But the fact that they call me Dr. Russell tells me something, right? I mean, I never said that anywhere, and I didn't give out my email address, but there was still that sort of little teacher-student barrier, which is, of course, in Europe in particular, a bigger deal than it is here. And since a lot of the world was from India and from Europe and so on, it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen.
I'm kind of formulating this question in terms of certificates when folks want to
Sure.
use them to get jobs and so forth. And in my work here, sometimes people want to use a MOOC as a verification that they are ready to return the student and so forth after
Right.
automatic dismissal.
Right. Yeah.
How reliable do you, with the community learning that's going on and the answering of questions and so forth, how reliable do you find, and can you find that the student's completion was their completion rather than a conglomerate of the community?
Right.
Am I making sense?
Yeah. So the question is, how reliable is a certificate of completion to actually having done the work? How is a good indicator of that? So you said something at the very end, which is interestingly subtle. If they succeed because of the community, that's kind of okay for me, because it suggests that they're actually smart enough to be reading all these things and integrating and answering correctly. But the other question is a good one, and it cuts across all of MOOCology, which is, does the certificate suggest that you actually command this knowledge? Truth is, I don't know. But the little bit of poking around I did to both in sort of post-class, like that one chart I showed, post-class behavior and follow-ups, like 3-month follow-ups. Did the class change your searching behavior? How so? How? Give me an example. That returned really positively, like 100%. I mean, really close. There's only a couple of people who said, no, I just didn't do anything for me. But I think those were high scores to begin with. But I think the other thing is that I didn't find a lot of evidence of people counterfeiting these things. It's trivial to counterfeit, really trivial. But I just didn't find much. Every time I found a certificate, I checked the logs, see if they were actually in there. I never found one that wasn't. And they could have. So I'm encouraged by that. Now, truthfully, this is not, the civil servant's entrance exam, so it's not high value. I imagine counterfeiting happens there, but it didn't happen much with us.
Since Google's such a popular target for claims of infringement, real or imagined, I'm wondering how diligent you were about avoiding potential claims, or how diligent your counsels were in monitoring the content that would be distributed.
Yeah, it's a great question. So since Google is a big target with big pockets, how hard did we work to make sure everything was copyright clean, basically? Yeah. Yes, we worked actually really hard to do that, and it was a major pain. It was a major pain, because there were a lot of examples I had been using that I didn't realize were infringing. To give you an example, I was showing about the multiple meanings of the word Diamondbacks, and I had the Major League Baseball example, right? So here Diamondbacks are Major League Baseball, and here's Diamondback as a snake, and blah, 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 right? No, thou shalt not touch a Major League Baseball logo with anything. And so I had to totally redo that example. So the lawyers went through everything. And thank God we have very good lawyers who said, this you can change that way, this one you don't have to worry about, this one I know you're worried about, don't worry about it, but this one you gotta change. And so we had a counsel go through everything.
This is a problem with open courseware stuff too.
It is,
Right.
it is. Yeah, it's, copyright is a difficult topic. But for people, it used to be that you could make readers, and you take it down to Kinko's down the street, and they was kind of do it, and I don't notice, right? But now, right, when you put it out there, it's everywhere, and you've got to be pretty careful about it. So all the images in the class are from public source things, or increasingly, it's just easier for me to go take the picture. It's easier to send me to Norway to take the picture than to go through all the hassle of trying to find, a clean version of it. And I'm serious. I didn't actually do that, but it's about that level of difficulty. Yes.
All right, one
Last question.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so teaching stage on stage is a lot different than
Yeah.
done full. What's the one thing about teaching MOOCs that you miss from the stage on stage experience, from the traditional education experience? What's the one
Yeah. That's a good question. And I'm gonna give you the same answer for both. So the question is, what's different or what did I miss between the being on stage experience in teaching classical lectures versus, being on a MOOC? Filming the lessons, the lectures, is supremely weird. Truth is, it was usually done at like 7 or 8 in the morning by me and maybe one other person sitting in a studio someplace. And there's no audience reaction. As hard as I try, nobody ever reacts in that environment. So it's a specifically kind of strange, weird skill. So I'll tell you a small anecdote. I once had to do a press tour where I sat in a sound stage in Mountain View with just the cameraman. And it's literally a hall like this, the cameraman's right there, and he's behind the camera, he's not looking at me. And in my earphone, I keep hearing, like every 5 minutes, somebody else from another news station would want to talk to me. And this is what really happens. 4 hours I sat in that room, and I talked to like 70 different news stations about something that Google was doing. It's like that. It's weird. And so, you don't get anybody even like moving in their seat or falling asleep or laughing or responding positively. And like I said, I measure my classes in oh my gods per hour. Nobody ever says, oh my God, right? And so that's a kind of weird situation there. And so that's the thing I missed most, I think, from normal lecturing. On the other hand, I had lots and lots of people pointing out things that no one had ever pointed out before because of this incredible diversity of students across the entire planet. You know what it's like, you teach kids at Michigan, right? And the current crop of 100 is kind of like last year's crop of 100. It's kind of like the year before that. And you kind of heard the same question 27 times. Now, every so often you get a new question, right? But when you're doing it with an international audience like that, every other question is novel or has a new perspective or something. And that's fascinating. So I learned a lot more by teaching that class than I would have learned, I think, by teaching 1,000 copies of my 300-person class. So it's a trade-off, and they both have advantages.